Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health with Sara Banta. I'm a busy wife, mom of 3, and an NANP certified supplement professional, but that's not all. I'm also the founder of the multi-award-winning Accelerated Health Products, a brand offering innovative, natural, scalar-enhanced supplements to optimize your health. And this podcast is not just a source of information. It's a community. We're all here to learn and grow on our health journeys, regardless of where you start today. And this podcast is the springboard to learning, and the free group coaching on Telegram is where we continue learning together. You can ask questions. I post tips and tools to deepen your health and keep you motivated every step of the way. So here's what you can expect. New episodes every Monday and Wednesday with in-depth health discussions and expert guests, hot topic issues that are in the news every Friday, and then of course followed with the free health group coaching. Have you thought about detoxing, but you're a little worried about too much, or you don't want those detox flu symptoms, or you don't want to be hangry and hungry? Well, I've created over 10 unique easy detox cleanse programs, from just getting you pooping in the colon cleanse to the parasite cleanse, candida cleanse, and the full boat of the accelerated diet cleanse that gives you a full shift. And you can take the detox quiz at SaraBanta.com to find out which one's right for you. And maybe you're not ready for a detox, but you want to start with a few supplements, don't know which ones to start with. Complete my health goals form, and you will get a free supplement protocol put together just by me. And just by taking a few steps forward with your health, you will change your life. And I'm here to help you every step of the way. We've got Dr. Robert Lustig. He's a professor of pediatrics in the Division of Endocrinology and a member of the Institute for Health Policy Studies at UCSF. He's a neuroendocrinologist with expertise in metabolism, obesity, and nutrition. We need him at the leading edge of what's going on today. He's the author of several books, acclaimed, including Fat Chance, Hacking of the American Mind, and my new favorite, The Metabolical. It's one you all must read. And we also have Dr. Rick Johnson. He's a professor of medicine at the University of Colorado and a clinician, educator, and researcher. He is board certified in internal medicine, infectious diseases, and kidney disease, and is the founding editor of Comprehensive Clinical Nephrology, and also the author of The Sugar Fix, The Fat Switch, and the best-selling author of Nature Wants Us to Be Fat. Welcome, you guys. I'm so excited to have you back.
Our pleasure.
Yes, same.
Well,
we're delighted.
We are in the midst of holiday season. People are gorging themselves. I don't know the statistic. You probably do. How much weight people gain between November and January, and then they try to lose it within the 3 days. They fall off the cliff of their goals, and then they're right back at it, right?
Well, actually, that's not true. Many years ago, my colleague at NIH, Jack Yanofsky, along with his wife, Susan Yanofsky, who's a program director at NIH, actually published a paper in the New England Journal, actually asking that question: is it true that people gain weight over the holidays? And it turns out, no, they gain weight all the time.
Okay, it just feels like it. We're so inflamed that we're puffier than normal, right?
Well, there's a lot of candy that people are eating over from Halloween through Christmas.
Absolutely.
That is absolutely true, but it's bad for your health more than it changes your weight.
Well, we're here to talk about the dangers of sugar, the problem of obesity, how to navigate the holiday season. And doing that in 2024 is much more difficult than doing it in 1950. You know, you bake your pumpkin pie, it's got real sugar, real pumpkin, real ingredients. Now our food system has been taken over by ultra processed foods. And as you have said, you know, the real food in the market is only 23% of the food. And then you add in the obesogens, the microplastics, the heavy metals, the toxicity, the artificial sweeteners, all of these things. So I really want to get into, and maybe we can start with you, Rob, the what has made this equation so much worse than our grandparents' generation?
Where we start. I'll start with one simple word: money. This is about money. It's about the corporatization of our food system. It's about subsidies. It's about the change in the American lifestyle to a two-person working family, so that one person wasn't home cooking all the time. Currently, 1/3 of Americans don't know how to cook, which is a very clear difference from where things were 50 years ago. And of course, it is about the dumping of sugar into virtually everything that we consume. As an example, if you go back to 1951 and the original Joy of Cooking cookbook, and you look at the same recipe for pumpkin pie for then versus the recipe that exists in the Joy of Cooking today, it's 250 calories per serving greater than it used to be, and it's all sugar.
Yeah.
So in fact, unless you make it yourself with your own family recipe, you've been co-opted, even when you make it yourself.
Right. And Rick, as we're entering this season, it's obviously very stressful. And you talk about uric acid and the survival switch, but I want to talk about just the survival switch as far as the stress that we're under and how much worse that stress of making, getting all of the gifts for everybody, the financial stressors, the non-caloric stressors that are making this so much worse on our bodies and putting us into that survival mode, and how that changes our metabolism.
Well, I would almost say that we're going into a fat mode more than anything else. But basically, there are a few things. One is that, our work really suggests, along with Rob, that sugar is one of the major culprits driving the obesity epidemic. And high fructose corn syrup is really the big player because they both contain really sugar, fructose and glucose. And so these are being put in all these foods that we're eating and is driving a lot of this epidemic. But our work also shows that the body can make sugar and it can make fructose, and it makes it from carbs, and it makes it from things like rice and pancakes and bread and cereals. And so we can get a double whammy. We first eat the sugar that we put on our food, and then we make the sugar in our body. And what you're talking about stress is that it turns out that there's several ways that the body makes fructose, and it makes it from carbs, but it's stimulated by stress, and it's stimulated by things like dehydration. It's stimulated by salt, but there's some evidence that even emotional stress and so forth may be enough to activate this switch that helps convert carbs to sugar. That last thing, there's some evidence for it, but it's not as strong as some of the other evidence. So we believe that it's real, but I think we need to do more studies to prove that. But I think emotional stress is activation of the sympathetic nervous system and things like that can also play a role in triggering this switch.
Absolutely. I mean, I see it myself. I see it in a lot of clients who say, I haven't changed anything. I'm eating all the right things and away from processed foods. At least they're telling me that. And I've put on 10 pounds. And, we were talking before we came on, that whether it's an emotional stress or a physical stressor, like these non-caloric toxins that come into the body that overload the liver and cause the body to gain weight, lower ATP, that's where people get confused. And then they think, well, I might as well just get into the Haagen-Dazs and drink the bottle of wine because I'm not getting results anyways, right?
And I will tell you, a Haagen-Dazs float in a Cabernet is, by far the best holiday drink there ever was.
Exactly, and it will lower your stress for a moment.
I think Santa Claus could go on Ozempic. That's what I think.
Well, and I want to get into that in down the road at the end of the hour, but
I think that's their next commercial pitch, Rick.
Well, we've talked about the fact that money, it's all about money, right? Well, you've got this world of Ozempics that are fighting the big food, right? Ozempic goes up, big food goes down.
Actually,
they go together. They go together.
Actually. They go together, and Nestle is now coming out with a line of Ozempic-approved foods.
Oh gosh.
That will, cause less nausea and vomiting, and help move the food through your intestine faster. Swear to God.
Wow. Well, you have to assume that the deep pockets are going to come together, right? So there you go.
In fact, Nestle sells you Butterfingers with one hand and, diabetes pills with the other.
Right. Well, I want to talk about the ultra processed foods, because when we're talking about sugar, we're not talking about the apple. We're not talking about the berries. We're not talking about the sweet potato. We're talking about the bag of potato chips or the orange juice or the fruit boxes, the sodas, the alcohol, all of those things. So what has happened to our food supply where it's literally an addiction? It goes along with social media addiction and gambling addiction and alcoholism, but you're not going to sit down and eat 5 potatoes, but you are going to sit down and eat a bag of potato chips.
Yes. So oil and salt, when you add it to carbs, really stimulates the appetite, and at the same time, the salt helps convert the carbs into sugar, and then once you've been eating a lot of sugar, you become very hungry. And so having a lot of fatty food around actually gives you the calories that cause the rapid weight gain. So the sugar is really the trigger to make you hungry. And then it's actually the high fat foods then that drive the weight gain. And if you are on a low carb diet, you don't have the sugar that stimulates the appetite. So you can be on a high fat diet without gaining weight, because it's like putting a lot of wood on a fire without a fire. But basically, yeah. So when you eat potato chips, it's different from like eating a plain potato, because the salt helps convert that potato into sugar in your body.
Right. Go ahead, Rob.
So the question that your audience wants to understand and wants to know is, what foods are addictive? Okay, and there's something called the Yale Food Addiction Scale. And obviously, sugar's at the top. And fat and salt are a little bit lower, not gone, but a little bit lower. And then protein is kind of at the bottom. And that's actually how price elasticity works too. If you look at the most price elastic foods, which means that they're not addictive, it's like eggs. And if you look at the most price inelastic foods, which means you'll pay any amount to get your fix, it's, fast food, soft drinks, and juice. And so, there are a lot of people who say, well, food can't be addictive. It's necessary for survival, blah, blah, blah. All right. Well, here is this volume right here called Food and Addiction. And you can see it's pretty darn thick. Okay. It's got 60 chapters in it. Okay. There is one chapter that says that food is not addictive, from the naysayers over in Europe. But other than that, basically, they're all saying the same thing. So the question is, all right, which foods are addictive? And the answer is sugar. Sugar's addictive. Fructose actually stimulates the nucleus accumbens, the reward center, the same place that cocaine, heroin, and nicotine stimulate. It also happens to be where shopping, gambling, internet gaming, social media, and pornography stimulate. There's one reward system, but there are multiple pathways into it. And sugar happens to be one of them. And sugar stimulates the reward system. Fat and salt don't. But fat and salt increase the salience of sugar, possibly for the reasons that Rick just told you, that, for instance, a sodium load actually changes the vasopressin 1B receptor, which increases the polyol pathway to make fructose. So it's very possible that salt and fat are gateways for sugar to be more addictive, but it's actually the fructose molecule itself that is the addictive molecule.
And so they take these foods and they'll inject them with salt and sugar and other things, MSG, and all these kinds of things that are not that healthy. And then they try to make the food taste really good. And so this is really the strategy of a lot of groups that are trying to sell food. They add all these things that are actually very bad for us, but that stimulate addiction and craving. So kettle corn, for example, they take popcorn, which, so popcorn is relatively benign by itself. But then when you add the sugar and the salt and the fat, and you get this thing called kettle corn or whatever, then you're really in trouble because people just inhale it,
Right. And I want to challenge anyone out there to eat 10 cups of plain popcorn with no butter or salt or anything on it. You just won't do it. And I've got a daughter who's 18. She's an athlete and she's trying to put on some weight. If I give her plain rice with her bison burger, she has a hard time finishing it. So I put on the butter and I put on the salt because her goal is to actually put some weight on. And then she's able to get it down because her brain says, okay, I like this. I want some more. And as we're talking about food and addiction, I think we should start with the definition of food, right?
Well, indeed. But before we do, and I want to go there, let me just tell you a little anecdote that I think, solidifies the question because you brought up this issue of rice. Okay. So once upon a time, I was a fellow at University of California, San Francisco in 1983. And then I moved away and then I moved back to, become professor in 2001. So there was an 18-year time difference between my first sojourn and my second. And when I first went to UCSF, in 1983, I would go to Chinese restaurants and they would always have both white rice and brown rice. Okay, and that made sense. And, brown rice was becoming a big deal at the time. And then I moved to New York City and they had white rice and brown rice also, just like San Francisco did. And then 18 years later, I moved back to San Francisco and they only had white rice. Now, if brown rice is supposed to be so good for you and San Francisco is such a health conscious city, how come they had it back in 1983, but they don't have it now? What happened in the interim? So it's a quiz. And the answer is, in San Francisco, they charge for the rice. In New York, they don't. Rice is part of the meal. And so in New York, they didn't care whether you ate white or brown. It made no difference to them. But in San Francisco, these Chinese restaurants realized that when they served brown rice, people ate half a bowl. And when they served white rice, they ate 2 bowls. And if you're charging for the rice, which would you rather they purchase? And so brown rice disappeared because white rice goes down a whole lot better. And the reason, of course, is because the fiber in the brown rice actually moves the food through the intestine, so you get the satiety signals sooner, which of course is why ultra-processed food is also fiberless food.
Right.
So not only the addition of sugar, but the removal of fiber is sort of what's happened to our food supply over the last 50 years.
And that leads into the question of the definition of food, because these ultra processed foods, they are lowering our energy, but they have these ingredients that our body doesn't even recognize. They have no calories. These artificial sweeteners, these artificial ingredients, MSG, they don't have calories, which is energy, supposedly, right?
Well, no, we need to define that.
Okay.
Okay. So I am here to tell your entire audience that we have to kill the calorie. The calorie is an inappropriate unit of measure. The calorie never made sense. And the reason is because the calorie is a unit of physics, not a unit of biology. So what is a calorie? A calorie is that amount of heat needed to raise 1 gram of water 1 degree centigrade. So it's a unit of heat. It's a unit of physics. Now, it is true that if you take any given food and you put it in a bomb calorimeter and you explode it, you will release energy. And you can measure that energy in the form of calories. That is, how much energy is released that will raise how many grams of water 1 degree centigrade. That is all true, but we are not bomb calorimeters. There's no bomb calorimeter in our body. What we have instead are these little gizmos in our cells called mitochondria. And mitochondria don't care what your calories are. They take foodstuffs that are delivered to it, and there's a whole, protocol by which how those foodstuffs get into mitochondria for the burning in the first place. And what they do is they turn that chemical energy in food into the chemical energy that your body can use, called ATP. Now, what we should care about is how much ATP does any given food generate. That's what we should care about. Calories are not even close to a proxy for that. And it turns out that there are certain foods that actually inhibit ATP generation. They inhibit mitochondrial function. They inhibit burning, even though they generate calories in a bomb calorimeter. So what? So the main one, the one that Rick and I both study, the reason we came to the party, is fructose. Because fructose actually inhibits 3 separate enzymes involved in mitochondrial ATP generation. It inhibits AMP kinase, the fuel gauge on the liver cell that induces mitochondrial biogenesis. It inhibits ACAD-L, acyl-CoA dehydrogenase long chain, which is necessary to cleave fatty acids into 2 carbon fragments so that they can be burned in the first place. And finally, the outpouring of uric acid, which Rick is, the world's expert on, from fructose metabolism. Uric acid inhibits carnitine palmitoyl transferase 1, which is the enzyme that regenerates carnitine, which is the shuttle mechanism by which the fatty acids get into the mitochondria in the first place. The sum total of which is that fructose is a dose-dependent mitochondrial toxin. Fructose inhibits burning in cells. Who cares about the calories?
I amen to that. And, here you're eating food, like take an athlete. And I've mentioned that my daughter rose for USC at the collegiate level. And that school has, the most money it can for their athletes, right? You go into their food, their protein refrigerator, and they've got the Gatorades, they've got the peanut butter and cracker snacks, and these are the elite athletes. So these athletes are eating food that is stealing ATP. So it's not right there. It's not giving them energy, even though it has a ton of calories that it's supposed to be fueling their system, and it's backfiring. And that's where so many people are getting it wrong, and they're counting their calories, eating low carb protein bars or snacks that are full of these other ingredients that inhibit ATP and they don't understand why they can't lose weight and they don't feel good. Rick, can you tie into that and dive deeper into the uric acid piece of this equation?
Sure. So, so many foods will generate uric acid when we eat the food. And the classic, are, well, are things called purines, like from shellfish, or from beer, but sugar and fructose generates uric acid. And our group, was very interested in this. Now, uric acid is known to cause a disease called gout. When the uric acid levels are high, they can form crystals in joints, and you can get this very painful arthritis. And there are a lot of people, maybe 8 million people in the U.S. who have gout. So it's a real problem. But we found that uric acid also has an effect on the energy factories, or these mitochondria, and can suppress the energy production. And it's a complicated mechanism, but basically the uric acid stuns the mitochondria so that they don't make so much energy. By the way, I have a little rice story myself. Should I tell you this little rice story?
Sure.
So, I've been very interested in what causes diabetes and looking at history as it relates to it. And, currently the country that has the highest diabetes rates, or one of them, is India. But if you go back into the early 1800s, there was almost no diabetes there at all. And the first reports come around 1820, and it was among the poor Indians that were developing diabetes. And it turned out that a very wise doctor realized that they were eating palm sugar, and because they couldn't afford rice and other things, so they were eating palm sugar. And so there was no cane sugar that was way too expensive for everybody. But there was palm sugar, and the poorer people got it because the palm sugar was very inexpensive. Then by the 1880, there was a whole flip, and instead of the poor people from India getting diabetes, it started occurring with the wealthy people, and it was associated with the influx of sugar. And today, not only sugar, but rice is really highly associated with the development of diabetes too. And then we talked about how rice can be converted to sugar in the body. But there's another rice story, and that is that white rice is often devoid of vitamins, especially B1 vitamin.
Right.
And there's an association with a disease called beriberi. And last year I was called on to investigate why 5 or 6 sailors on a little Indonesian fishing fleet all were developing heart failure and swelling up, and 3 of them died. And we were able to figure out that it was from their diet, and they were just eating rice and fish. And so white rice has a couple perils. One is it can increase the risk for diabetes, but white rice is also, it doesn't have the key vitamins in it. So everyone, be careful with how much rice you eat.
That was the first vitamin deficiency that was ever discovered. Was
beriberi.
Thiamine deficiency in beriberi in people who ate polished white rice.
Yes.
By Casimir Funk in 1912. Won the Nobel Prize for that, by the way.
Well, they didn't give me a Nobel Prize when I figured this out. But that's because it was already published.
Well, you deserve it. You mentioned the liver, and we know that over 45%, I believe, of adults have fatty liver disease. Our children have fatty liver disease and obesity, something that should not be in our children's population. How is the liver affecting this equation? Because it's almost like the sugar and high processed foods are making liver health go down. Liver health go down is making the addiction for these foods even worse. And it's just this vicious cycle, right? And you have no fiber, no nutrients coming into the body. Our livers are also backed up by the microplastics and the toxins we're talking about in this decade. So let's talk about the liver, because my listeners know that I love my liver, and I always tell you, you got to take care of your liver. It is that main organ that is so important for overall health.
Indeed. The liver is kind of the silent killer in this story. You know, we always used to say hypertension was the silent killer. And, you know, chronic kidney disease was the silent killer. And, you know, now the liver's a silent killer as well. And you can basically fry your liver and not know it until it's, you know, really too late. So we have this thing now called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. The Liver Association rebranded it. It's now called metabolic associated steatotic liver disease. I think that's an absolute disaster. Really, what it ought to be called is diet associated fatty liver disease. So it went from NAFLD to MASLD. I think it should be called DAFLD, because it's always diet that gets you in trouble. And so the question is, what is causing that fatty liver? And the answer is sugar. Sugar is the primary cause. And it used to be alcohol, and now it's sugar. Okay, and kids don't drink alcohol, but 20% of children have fatty liver disease and they don't drink alcohol. And the reason is because fructose and alcohol are metabolized virtually identically. Okay, so fructose gets turned into fat in the liver through a process known as de novo lipogenesis, new fat making. And the reason it does is because the mitochondria are poisoned. So if the mitochondria weren't poisoned, the fructose would make it all the way to ATP, but they are poisoned. And so the energy substrate has to do a detour, and it detours through this process called de novo lipogenesis, which turns the fructose into fat. Now, that fat then gets packaged into something called triglyceride, okay? You know, very low density lipoproteins, which you measure in the serum triglyceride. And then the goal is for that triglyceride to leave the liver, circulate in the bloodstream as serum triglyceride, which you can measure, and then be taken up at the adipose tissue. This is how the fat gets from your liver to your fat cell through this process. But that's only if you can package it. Turns out in order to package it, okay, you have to be able to have certain other items available to you. What the most important of which is choline. Choline, and choline you get from, you know, animal products. You get it from meat, basically. And what happens is, if you don't have the choline, you can't make the phosphatidylcholine. You can't package the lipid droplets so that they can be released. And so what they do is they end up precipitating in the liver, and then they cause damage. Now you've got fatty liver disease. In addition, ultra-processed food needs glutathione. Ultra-processed food doesn't generate glutathione. And glutathione is the antioxidant that your liver needs to detoxify reactive oxygen species, the oxygen radicals that come off from normal metabolism. And so when you basically take the sugar, which is the poison, and you add it to the ultra-processed food, which is devoid of the antidotes, the choline and the glutathione, okay, you've got a recipe for basically frying your liver.
It's not just a double whammy. It's like a triple, quadruple.
Oh, it's a cluster F. Is what it is.
Yeah, I can add to this a little bit too, from a kind of a more historic aspect, and that is, so when it was known for a long time that, you know, alcohol causes liver disease, and when I was a resident, this was, you know, if a person came in with a liver failure and it wasn't from a virus or hepatitis, it often was from alcohol. And then in the late 1980s and early 1990s, there was suddenly this new disease that was appearing, a type of liver disease with fat in it that could progress sometimes to liver failure, and it could lead to liver transplantation, and liver cancer could come out of it. And initially it was just like being observed and no one really knew what it was. And then it was like suddenly it was like epidemic. And I have a little story, I sort of piping my own, or complimenting myself, but
So, Sarah, this is what happens
yeah,
when you get old guys on the show.
yeah. So I exactly. So I was at the University of Florida, and this liver doctor got up and said, we have this mysterious epidemic. No one knows the cause, and she gave this beautiful story about it in a research conference. And I was aware that if you give fructose to a rat, you get fatty liver.
Mhm.
And so at the end I said, well, did you take a history on sugar intake in these people? And I would be happy to look in the liver biopsies to see if there's evidence of fructose metabolism, because fructose can do it. So she then went and Manal Abdul Malik is her name, and
Yep.
she went and started doing epidemiology, and she found that all these people with fatty liver, they had a huge history of soft drink intake, of high fructose corn syrup intake,
Sweet tea.
of sweet teas,
in North Carolina.
and they had high uric acid, which we showed is linked with this. And then she sent me the liver biopsies, and we looked in the liver, and there was all these like fructose metabolizing enzymes that were all sky high, and she and I reported it, and that was like the very first paper linking high fructose corn syrup with fatty liver. At least in the human, there had been these reports in rats of fructose, and that kind of like, since there have been like 1,000 papers on it, and it's pretty clear that this epidemic correlates with the bringing in high fructose corn syrup, and for the rise in the overall sugar intake that's occurred of sugar and high fructose corn syrup. So and now there are a lot of studies showing that if you can restrict or lower your sugar intake, you can improve your fatty liver. It's potentially reversible. And in fact, I think Rob probably did one of the most important studies on that, showing that fructose reduction could improve fatty liver in children. And
Indeed.
go ahead.
We took 43 children from our clinic, all with metabolic syndrome, obesity plus at least one comorbidity, all high sugar consumers, most with fatty liver. And what we did was we studied them on their home diet, and then we catered their meals for 9 days. No added sugar. No added sugar. Now, if you do that, you're going to take the percent calories from sugar from 28 down to 10%. Now, if you do that, you're going to lose 350 to 400 calories per day out of the diet. And if you do that for 10 days, you might lose weight.
Right.
We didn't want these patients to lose weight, because if they lost weight, the critics would say, well, of course they got better, they lost weight. We wanted them to stay the same weight, or even gain weight for that matter. So we had to put the 350 to 400 calories back as something that wasn't sugar. We gave them starch. We gave them glucose. We gave them polymerized glucose instead of glucose fructose, which is sugar. So basically what this was a glucose for fructose exchange done isocalorically, so that there was no change in calories and no change in weight. Just get rid of the sugar, add the starch. So in the vernacular, we took the pastries out, we put the bagels in. We took the sweetened yogurt out, we put the baked potato chips in. We took the chicken teriyaki out, we put the turkey hot dogs in. So we didn't give them good food, we gave them crappy food, we gave them ultra-processed food. We bought the food at Safeway, just, like they would, all right? But it was chosen to be no added sugar food. So the fat was the same, the protein was the same, even the fiber was the same. The only thing that was different was the fructose was down, the glucose was up. That's it. And we gave them a scale, and every day we'd call them up on the phone, what'd you weigh? And if it turned out that they were losing weight, eat more! Because we wanted them to basically maintain a stable weight throughout the entire 10-day period. And then we studied them again after 10 days on their, quote, new diet, unquote. And lo and behold, the fat in their liver disappeared.
Yeah.
Their visceral fat went down. Their blood pressure went down. And their pancreas started making insulin properly again. We reversed their metabolic syndrome with no change in calories, no change in weight, just by getting rid of the offending agent.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I have a similar little story. You know, when I was when we were looking at this fatty liver thing with Manal Abdul Malik, and we were inducing fatty liver with fructose in rats, my head technician came to me and said, you know, my son, who's 18, has been diagnosed with bad fatty liver, and the mom was an ultrasound tech. And so she could actually, you can look at fat with an ultrasound machine without having to you know, do a liver biopsy. So she could monitor how much fat was in his liver. So my technician said, hey, you know, my son drinks a lot of soft drinks. And so they had him cut out his soft drinks, and we watched the fatty liver disappear over a period of months. And then my technician came to me and said, Rick, you gotta write a book. You gotta write about fructose. Says we can become rich. We'll patent this, you know. No, you can't patent that. But yeah, that's how it all started with my wonderful the guy in my lab who told me to you know, yeah, that's how I started.
Yeah, I'll tell you how I started.
I think you started before me, maybe.
No. I don't think so.
I
think you were around the same. We were around the same time. I think we both came to the same conclusion separately.
Right.
But it's early on in my you know, lecture circuit stuff. You know, maybe 2010. It was after Sugar the Bit of Truth, which was 2009, and I'm sitting on a plane from Chicago to San Francisco, and there's a big beefy guy in a t-shirt and sandals sitting next to me. And he keeps looking over at my computer screen. And it was getting a little annoying, and I was about to say something to him. You know, I'm typing away, you know, I'm actually making a PowerPoint for, you know, another talk. And he goes, out of the blue, he says, fructose, you know that's poison. And I go, who says?
That's you who said that.
He said, well, it's all over the internet. And there's this doctor, and he did this video, and he showed that fructose is poison, and you look like him. It was like a comedy. It really was a sketch comedy. And it turns out the guy, he's a Portuguese pastor, okay, who lives in Chicago and is actually on his way to San Diego to give a guest sermon. And he says to me, this is a sign from God. I am not going to talk about what I was going to talk about. I am going to talk about fructose at my sermon.
Good for him.
Okay. Sure.
See how you're changing the world even when you're just sitting on an airplane, Rob.
I have to tell you, it was a really surreal moment.
Well, before we go, you know, a while back, I was talking to my husband, and he's really good at business ideas. And he goes, Sarah, you need to come up with an app that someone like my brother, who doesn't know anything about food, can go into the grocery store and say, this is good for me, this is not. And Rob, you've done that, if I'm correct, with PureFact, which I think is just a godsend.
Right. Perfact, not pure fact.
Yeah. Did I say, I said Perfact.
Perfact. PERFACT. And the audience can find it at perfact.co, not com, co. PERFACT.co.
Tell people about it.
Right. So what Perfact is it's a computerized recommendation engine. So it is not AI, but it is a recommendation engine based on the science of metabolic health. Because AI doesn't know what metabolic health is. And I can prove it, because 44% of the global branded food database at the USDA is wrong. So you actually have to know what you're doing. And so Perfact uses the science of metabolic health, protect the liver, feed the gut, support the brain, to determine the healthfulness of any given food in your grocery store, not somebody else's, but your grocery store. So think of it this way. The best way to explain Perfact would be an example. Let's say you, Sara Banta, has metabolic syndrome and gout and kidney stones. Thank God you don't, but let's say you do for today. All right, so you need a low refined carbohydrate, low fructose, low purine, low oxalate diet. Okay, you go to the grocery store, what are you going to buy? You have no friggin' clue. None whatsoever. And even if you brought a dietitian with you, you'd still have no friggin' clue. And what are you going to do? Read 40,000 labels to figure out what you're going to buy? I mean, give me a break. Can't be done. So what are you going to do? You're going to end up buying what you always buy because that's what you like. And your metabolic syndrome, your gout, and your kidney stones will only get worse. And that's where we are right now. That's the current, state of the art. So here's how Perfact disrupts that. Let's say you are a subscriber to Perfact. So, Sara, are you Italian?
No, I'm not.
Okay. All right. Well, Banta, it's possible. All right. So you wake up in the morning and you say, I haven't had Italian in a while. I'm in the mood for Italian. I'm in the mood for chicken cacciatore for dinner. So you go to perfact.co, you open it up, and you type in chicken cacciatore. You hit return, you close up your computer, you walk away, you're done. That's it. Everything else happens in the background. Step 1. Perfact accesses your biochemical profile, which lives online. Sara Banta. She has metabolic syndrome and gout and kidney stones. She needs a low refined carbohydrate, low fructose, low purine, low oxalate diet. Step 2. Perfact accesses a database of 2 million recipes that live online, finds all the recipes that are chicken cacciatore, say there are 20 or 30 of them, analyzes each one to determine which one has the lowest refined carbohydrate, the lowest fructose, the lowest purine, and the lowest oxalate.
Wow.
And chooses that recipe and says, that's what we're going to make for Sara Banta tonight. Step 3. Okay, Perfact then goes to your grocery store, finds all of the ingredients that fill the recipe with the lowest purine, the lowest refined carbohydrate, the lowest sugar, the lowest oxalate ingredients that are available at your store, puts them in an Instacart or Amazon Fresh, ships them to your house with the recipe by 3 p.m. And finally, most importantly, step 4, Perfact takes the bill for that purchase and charges your insurance company the cost of the food.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. And this is
Does it cook the food? Does it cook the food for you? That's what I want to know.
No, it doesn't cook the food. That'll be step 5.
This is a definite improvement over the rule I was taught. Jack LaLanne is famous for saying, if it tastes good, spit it out.
Right.
Yours is definitely an improvement.
Indeed. So,
well, you guys,
the point is, you don't know what the decision-making process has to occur at the time of procurement. And that means the grocery store. The grocery store is a dangerous place because 73% of the items in the American grocery store are ultra-processed.
Right.
And therefore, not food.
Not food. Back to the definition of food. Well, I cannot believe we're out of time because there were so many other points that I wanted to touch on. Rob and Rick, Rob first, why don't you tell people where they can find you? And you already mentioned where they can find the Perfact.
So I'm easy to find. I have a website, robertlustig.com, LinkedIn, Facebook, anywhere but X. Okay. I refuse to be on X. I once upon a time was, and I said, not a chance in hell. Uh, and I'm sticking to that. I've written 3 books, as you mentioned, and virtually everything that Rick and I have talked about today is in my book, Metabolical, and in Rick's book, Nature Wants Us to Be Fat. If you really want to understand this field and what's going on with our food, I think those 2 books. And also, I will recommend a 3rd book by my good friend and colleague, Dr. Casey Means. And she wrote a book called Good Energy about mitochondria. And all of these are mitochondrial diseases.
And I would love to have her on my show. So let's make that happen. And Rick?
Yeah, so I also have a website, drrichardjohnson.com. I have Instagram. I think it's Dr. Richard J. Johnson. I have my book, Nature Wants Us to Be Fat, and I think Metabolical is also should be on your list. And I do have one final comment for those of you when you go out looking for foods for Christmas. If you do get a donut, the best part of the donut is the hole. Just remember that.
I love it. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Wow, that was amazing information. And it really highlights that our food system has been hijacked. It's not just about calories in, calories out. It's about ATP. It's about liver health. It's about things working and the food you're taking in actually being food. So hopefully this was helpful. The idea of increasing your ATP through food and also helping your metabolism, you can use supplements like the Accelerating Iodine, the Accelerated Fast, the Accelerated Thyroid. Most people are suffering from thyroid issues. And something that Rob has talked about before is the fact that the body temperature has gone down from 98.6 to 97, and we're all suffering from low body temperature, which means you're burning less calories. So there's so many factors that go into this. During the holiday season, make sure you're cooking the apple pie. If you're going to have some apple pie, don't get the store-bought with all of the ingredients. Choose the protein on your plate first, fill up with that, and then eat a little bit of the other stuff, and be mindful. Sit and really enjoy the food, the family together. Don't just binge and throw the food down your throat like sometimes you do when you're stress eating. Those are a few tips, and thanks for listening. Our discussion does not have to stop here. If you're feeling lost in the supplement world, no worries. I'm here to help. I know it can be confusing. You can start by getting your free supplement protocol. Head to SaraBantaHealth.com, complete the form, and follow me on social media at Accelerated Health Products. Join the free group coaching on Telegram. The link's on the website. And you can listen to this podcast and all my podcasts at Accelerated Health with Sara Banta on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, E360, iHeartRadio, and over 100 different platforms. Share this episode. My goodness, everyone needs to hear it. And you can use coupon code podcast10 to get 10% off your first order. Remember, I'm live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So join me next time for more ways to unlock your health potential.